All right. So I believe that we're live. Hello, everyone. How are you all doing? If you can hear us, just let us know in the chat. But I do believe that we're live. I can see the live indicator. So I'm just going to go ahead and get started. So today's topic is PM problems, no easy answers, right? Or PM dilemmas, PM problems, no easy answers. So um, I am very, very excited to be joined by Andy Kaufman. Andy, for many of you that don't know, has this amazing podcast, one of the top PM podcasts in the world. But I'll let Andy introduce himself. But just before that, I just want to quickly set the stage for what we're going to talk about. So we're going to go through um, maybe tricky situations or difficult situations that PMs or PM leaders will go through or have gone through or are currently going through. And then we're going to just sort of talk through how to navigate them, what might be the best way to navigate them given your situation. On top of that, you can also chime in the comments, and you can even send us questions of maybe a different scenario that you're going through and you want us to help solve that. All right. So don't hesitate to just use the comments and drop in the chat. All right. So without further ado, Andy, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Oh, thanks. I've been looking forward to this. We've been talking about this for a while, so I'm really glad it's working out.
No, thank you so much for making it. So Andy, for those that don't know who you are, could you introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm from the Chicago area, and from a personal standpoint, I'm a dad of 5. 3 of them are out of the house, 2 of them are still at home, and a grandpa of 4, and a 5th one on the way. And so I'd say those are some of my favorite titles right there. Those are my favorite. And about 25 years ago, started a company that does project management training and leadership training. So went from a career in IT to when you know how somebody's put into a project management role and they're like weren't trained for it. It's like, hey, you're responsible for this now. Every week, that's what we're doing, and often our project management classes are really leadership classes. So that's what we do. That's how we spend. And the People in Projects podcast is a passion project that is just so fun to help try to like you're doing, like so many people are doing, they're trying to give people hope, like how there are tools and ideas that can help us. So that's what the podcast is all about.
Yeah, no, for those of you that haven't listened to Andy's podcast, you should. It's really good. It's one of the highly rated podcasts for PM. So I highly recommend that you check it out. All right. So Andy, let us tackle the first question or the first dilemma. So I'm just gonna I'm gonna read it out, and then we can start to delve into it. So this is from somebody who the person says, my manager wants me to report the project as green. It isn't green. Key milestones are slipping, risks are increasing, and everyone close to the work knows that we're in trouble. They say that they're trying to avoid unnecessary executive attention before they have a recovery plan. I understand their reasoning, but my name is on the report. What do I do? So basically, this is pressure to misrepresent project status.
Yeah. All right. So let me give you 2 stories, and these are real stories as well. I was talking to a guy who he was in this very situation, and he was a contractor to the military. Although I don't think it was the U.S. military. The way he said it and the location of it was, but regardless, it was a construction related project, and it was kind of similar to what you're talking about here. And he was told the general is coming to town, and you have to say the status is green because it's the general. You have to say it because it's the general. And he's like, but it's not green. And they're like, it's the general. And so in his situation, which is kind of like this situation, he decided, he's like, I cannot lie about it. I mean, I just, from a credibility perspective, I can't. So they got his boss to sign off on it to say it's green. And the way he told me the story was that the general came, general was all happy, general left. But here's a lesson I've had to learn the hard way, is that truth and time walk hand in hand. And eventually it came out that guy's boss had lied about it, and that boss got fired. So the guy who told me this story said, I feel like I did the right thing, from a integrity perspective. He goes, I wasn't being a jerk about it, but I'm just saying, I with my responsibilities, I'm not the big boss, but with my responsibilities, I cannot lie about it. So he made that decision. Right? So that's one. Another example, and then I'll get to a specific, is a friend. I'm going to call him Jim. He was brought into a company. He'd been a pretty high level guy, a CIO, but he's in between jobs, brought in as a consultant. And he goes, it's the easiest job I've ever had. He goes, all I have to do is organize meetings and take minutes. I'm getting paid a ton of money. I am home at night. He goes, I love this job. But the guy who brought him in said, hey, just all this experience, like look around and see if there's anything that we can improve, So he starts sniffing around. He finds a $10 million program that's reporting, in the scenario that we're talking about, effectively green. That from a cost perspective, it's all good, right? That's what it's reporting. What he finds out is they are $3 million overspent on a $10 million program. So way off. I mean, it's not like a little bit off, way off. Right. So he goes to his direct boss, who's not who brought him in. It was the boss's boss who brought him in. Anyway, he goes to his direct boss and said, I'll call that other boss's name John. John asked me to look around, and I found this program. It's reporting, like a cost performance index 1. It's actually like 0.7, something like that. So he said it to her, like, I have to tell John. And what he told her was, or she told him, you cannot tell John. So he's kind of in the situation of the scenario you're talking about. So there's never just, or usually they're not just this one thing. Like there's all this stuff going on. Like, I've got credibility with John. Do I want to lose that credibility? Hey, I told my boss, I want to keep my job. This is the best job I ever had. I don't want to lose it. So there's all these dynamics going on. What he decided to do was he told her, I feel like I have to tell John, but I won't make a big deal of it. I'm not going to be waving a flag of, I'm not going to make a big deal of it. He called me that night and he goes, I think I'm getting fired tomorrow. That's what he said. He thinks he's getting fired the next day. You want to know what happened? So he goes into work the next day and John's like, thank you. Thanks for letting us know. I appreciate it. In fact, what I call him, Jim actually got more responsibility. And so it was all good. And his boss feigned any knowledge of it. And so he felt like I did the right thing. Right. And so he was able to keep his job until a month later, he got let go. And somebody who got kind of outed from the whole thing, exposed from the whole thing, had enough power to get rid of him. And so they said it was under the guise of didn't follow process, but people who know him, he followed process. He's just a scapegoat. So I share those two stories because they show that these are not easy. And ultimately you have to look in the mirror and try to figure out what are your priorities, what are your values, and how you're going to deal with situations. And so I interviewed author of a book named Credibility. It's Jim Kouzes. He and his writing partner, Barry Posner, have sold millions of copies of a book called The Leadership Challenge. And they've kind of repurposed that book in a lot of different ways, but Credibility is the name of the book. And so for you, Mukhtar, and for everyone listening to us, have you ever been asked to support a decision that you don't agree with? So you don't have to give the scenario, but what would you say? Have you ever been asked to support a decision you don't agree with?
For me? Yes. Several times. I'm trying to think of a particular story. Maybe it will come to me, but yes, I know that this is something that okay. So I think one thing that happened, yes. So when I was there was this position that I was in. I was sort of responsible for not only operations but also building the business, right? And we used to always have these presentations. Like we will go and present, and there's my boss would always lie. Like, okay, we have this, we have that, in the sales spread. Like they'll sell things.
And it's not true.
Right. And that didn't make me feel comfortable. And I think on top of that as well, everybody does that. Like if you're in the business development role, like basically you're trying to get the deal.
Right.
But that didn't quite sit well with me. So But
So since you're being asked to support, you're asked to support the line, right? And you didn't agree with it, right?
Right. So, but there's all, because like I will go into presentation with my boss, and he will lie. But I mean, I can't. I'm not gonna like say. I'm not gonna call him out there.
Exactly.
But other times when I would do the presentation myself, then I wouldn't. I would try to be as truthful as possible. But I think I just developed a reputation that, okay, this guy is not gonna fib, right? And then on top of that, like when you don't play along, I think one thing that I really made sure is that like I was squeaky clean on other things. Like, I went above and beyond, because I have so many things against me. Like when I was in that role, I was like the youngest ever. I was a minority. So there are just so many things that, so if you're already sort of sticking out, and if you're not playing along, like you have to be like very good. You have to compensate on other things. So I think
that's a good point.
Sort of been my experience, and that sort of worked for me. So they might not necessarily invite me to go have a beer with them, but they're keeping me there because like I am like delivering and bringing the company a lot of money, right? So basically, from a business sense, it makes sense to have me, and I think that's sort of what has worked for me.
I like that. That's a great lesson for everyone listening. That a chief information officer said it this way to me. He goes, "Credibility is currency. Credibility is currency." And so, if I understood your story right, it's like I'm going to work on credibility in every area you can. And currency doesn't always have to mean compensation, although that's what you help people do, is to get jobs that are high paying. But currency can also be, you want more influence. You want people to listen to you, to value your opinion, credibility. So I think that's a beautiful way to try to navigate what you did. I mean, you could have just called the person out like, "This place is a bunch of liars and I'm out of here." I mean, you could have just done that, but you were like, "What can I do to make sure you establish credibility?" Well, anyway, I asked Jim Kouzis of this. If you're being asked to support a decision that you don't agree with, do you lose credibility? So I think everyone listening to us, think about situations where you've been asked to support a decision you don't agree with. And wisely, Jim didn't say yes or no. And this is what really helped me. And he said, first of all, did you do everything you could to influence a better decision? And I was immediately busted with that one, because I kind of grew up with the sense of, if they're the boss, they say jump, we say how high. Like if they make a decision, there's no influencing up, right? Like I was never taught about managing up in formal education. You just have to learn that, that's more of a street smart thing. And so I think that's a wise thing for all of us to think. Like this person who's being told it's green, make it green, even though it's not green. Instead of just, do I do green or do I not do green? Like, how can I influence a better decision? And I believe in this scenario, you have to read it again, but I think the boss said something along the lines of, until we have a recovery plan. And so I think there might be some opportunity here to say, well, how about this? We're going to go in with, these are the risks. This is what's going on. Here's our recovery. Let's work on the recovery plan. So instead of it being a status issue, let's have a recovery plan. So this is what Jim said. First, did you do everything you could to influence a better decision? Secondly, if you did, is it an ethical issue or a quality or safety issue?
Okay.
And so his point is, if you did everything to influence a better decision, even if they're the boss, and they still don't agree with you, let's say it's not an ethical issue or a safety or quality issue, you lose credibility if you don't support it. Now, in this case, it feels like it might be an ethical issue without knowing more about the specific situation. Right. So in this case, I think I'd be much more inclined to, well, the status according to our standards is yellow, but here's the deal. I will help you put together a recovery plan. I will help you in every way. Like you're trying to do everything to support this boss. Right. What too often I see a guest told me this years ago. He goes, avoid the BSL narrative. Bad, stupid, lazy. Avoid the BSL narrative. And I think in this situation, it'd be really easy to go, my boss is an idiot, or my boss is evil. And so you got to avoid the BSL narrative. So avoid jumping to the conclusion of my boss is just unethical.
Right.
At least try, and then say, what can I do to set her up for success? So that when she goes in and tries to defend this, that we've got a recovery plan. Anyway,
Yeah.
I would, and if they still say, well, you said yellow, we're going to make it green, I would make sure I have every risk documented that I can.
Right.
So at least, and because risks are a little bit easier to tolerate, than these are specific issues. If you know what I mean, like these are the risks. We're not pointing fingers. We're just, these are the risks, and just trying to, as objectively as possible, make sure the risks are clear. So anyway, that's what I did.
Yeah, no, I really like that, and a couple of things that stood out for me. So the BSL thing that you mentioned, so I think with that, number one, there's like, okay, giving people benefit of the doubt, and then number two, like the people usually have motivations right underneath, right? You might not necessarily agree with how they're going about it, but they're motivations. And I think if you can peel the layers and just get to that motivation and just acknowledge it, I find that when you do that, like you can easily connect with that person. Like, I know that you're worried about, you might not necessarily say it in this word. I know, you're worried about how you might come across, or, so just acknowledging that, and then now putting together a plan, like you mentioned, like I want to work with you on how we're gonna de-risk this, like that. Like when you take care of the underlying fear, like you can really influence somebody much better that way, as opposed to just labeling the person and saying, okay, I'm just not gonna play along, right? So there's usually ways to, it's not easy, but there are ways to sort of navigate this issue, right?
Yeah, there's a guy named Peter Bregman and his co-author, Howie Jacobson, I think it is. But anyway, they wrote a book called You Can Change Other People is the name of it. It's a really interesting interview because the title just sounds presumptuous, doesn't it? You can change other people. I think it sounds presumptuous. But really the book is, how do you set the conditions under which people are willing to change? That's really what the book is. But the single biggest thing that I took away from the interview with them and their book was their first step in changing someone. And that is, you must come across as you must be an ally, not a critic.
Right.
You must be an ally, not a critic. I think in this scenario, I think it'd be really easy to be the critic. Like, what do you mean? You want me to put my name on it? You know what I'm saying? I think it'd be so easy to be almost like defensive or offendable. I have a personal policy, and I'm not saying I'm perfect at it, but I've gotten a lot better at it. I am unoffendable. Okay. Like, if you go into it like, this can't offend me with this, but what can we do to make this better? What can we? How can you be an ally, not a critic? And there might be times we have to be the critic, depending on the situation. But even when we're being the critic, how can we do it in a way that I'm being an ally with this boss? Because she doesn't want to draw attention, Right. And so, what can I do to help her, in a way that is actually because ally. Any thoughts, much of like what an ally implies or not? Like how's like an ally is not a friend. Like how's an ally different from something else? You think?
Yeah, I mean, like you are working together towards a common goal, right? I mean, that's what comes to me. Like we're on the same side, as opposed to you don't need to be best buds, but you can work together even if you disagree towards a common goal.
Yeah, like even in the scenario you talked about, I think you said we're not going out for drinks together, but you were still committed to helping the organization grow. You were still committed to serving the customers. And I think when I think of ally, I maybe don't even agree with the person, but we're on the same mission. Like we're trying to achieve the same sort of thing. And so I've got a lot of mileage personally by avoiding the BSL narrative. How can I be an ally in this situation, not a critic? By the way, for those who are listening who are parents, this applies. You're trying to influence a child. You're trying to influence maybe even a spouse. How can you be an ally, not a critic? Avoid the BSL narrative. What can you do to try to influence a better solution? And if it's just preferences, like a lot of times when it comes to bosses, it's just preferences. It's not truly ethical. I think the scenario you gave, I think, is closer to ethical. It's closer to a truth or not. But
Right.
a lot of the situations go to this tool or this tool. We make
Right.
this decision. That's it. It's just preferences. And you know what? If I still dig my heels in because I don't agree with it, at some point, it's the Amazon decision. We're going to disagree but commit.
Come here.
At some point, you lose credibility if we tried to do our best to work out something better or not. Then that's where I come down to. There are times I might have to disagree and commit.
Right.
But
No,
if I
for
can
sure.
still-
Yeah. No, for sure. And what was I gonna say? So yeah, I want to acknowledge like that. A lot of time when it comes to preferences, yeah, you choose your battles. Basically, not every battle is worth fighting for. And if you are the kind of person that's known for just fighting every battle, then you lose credibility fast. But I do also want to acknowledge that there are toxic environments there, out there, right? And I've been in toxic environment where it's like that this boss has tried to throw you under the bus several times, and they're just, so it's not the best and it's not the healthiest of environment. So I want to acknowledge that.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think this goes back to what you mentioned at the beginning. You need to just look at your own set of values, right? And just act in alignment with those values, right? So for some people, maybe it doesn't necessarily contradict with their values, or maybe there are other things in the equation, like, right now, I cannot afford to lose this job right now. I'm just going to bide my time. So there are different situations and scenarios out there. And then, for some people, it's like, okay, this is my line. I'm not gonna do anything to cross that line. If this is gonna cost my career, so be it, right? And this also reminds me of when you see a lot of these scandals out there, like now to mention, like, these are public. This is all public now, so I think
there's no shortage of them, right? There's a lot of them.
Like like the BP situation, from back in the day with the BP Horizon situation where there were the oil spills, and then the blame on Boeing. So when you actually go in and investigate, you would actually find that there were people that either that spoke up and were taken out, or people tried to speak up, but it's just like the culture did not allow for that. So I the reason I mention all of this is that I want to acknowledge that there are toxic or maybe not, like, environments that are not conducive and that would really make you have to choose between, okay, am I going to go against my values, or am I, so there are these situations out there. And I think like that, it comes down to what you want to do. Yeah, I don't know. What are your thoughts there?
There's a got to know the former mayor of a small town, and I was like, what's it like being a mayor of a small town? Because like in a small town, everybody knows each other. Like in a big city, you might be able to hide, but he goes, well, here's an interesting thing I learned is that when you're in the general public, you have the right to see things in black and white. Like that's a good law, that's a bad law, that's a politician, good, bad, black and white. But he goes, this is what I learned. When you're in leadership, you have to see the shades of gray.
Right.
And that's stuck with me because I think an easy answer to this is you don't give it green, you go yellow or red, you stand your ground. And I think that would be a very easy answer for you and I when we're not in the complexity of the situation. But there's gray. And so each person has to make their own decision on this one. But what I found was, so regarding your toxic comment, and I think it's well said. I'm really glad you added that to the discussion. I don't remember who the guest was. This was years ago, but he was a lawyer and helped deal with bullying situations. And there is an academic, I think you might even say a legal definition of what bullying is.
Interesting.
And I don't even remember what the components are, to be perfectly honest. But one thing I walked away from that conversation, and once again, it was years ago, was I think sometimes we say something is toxic, or we saying it's bullying, but it doesn't really meet that standards. It's just people not agreeing with each other and different styles. And I for the person who's listening and they're like, oh, you don't know my boss. It could be that they truly are bullies and they're truly toxic. But I've seen, I could tell you situations with coaching clients, but I can't for confidentiality, who had really tough bosses, but they found ways to be able to navigate without compromising their values.
Right.
But they found ways to navigate it. And let's face it, life is short, and sometimes it's not even worth that effort. Sometimes like this is not the culture organization, it's not worth the effort, even if you could influence them. But I don't know. How can I be an ally here without compromising my values? How can I try to make the situation better? And ultimately, that might be leaving someday. But I think there's some option if we can hang in there. I don't remember. I'd have to go back to the source of the quote, but he said, "Never let me mistake that I'm being persecuted when they're not agreeing with me." It's something like that. Actually, I think it goes back to the poet Emerson, where just because someone doesn't agree with me doesn't mean I'm persecuted. It just doesn't mean it's bullying. And so I don't want to oversimplify it, but I think we can easily oversimplify it black and white.
Right. Yeah. Amazing. No, a lovely discussion. So I want to summarize it for this person. So now, I hope I'm going to be able to do a good job summarizing. But anyway, you help me out. So for the person going through this situation, it's so we are saying that you're not just gonna. It's not best to just be obtuse and stubborn and just say, okay, you know what, I'm not gonna, this goes against my values, I'm not gonna do that. Like oftentimes, like there are ways to sort of navigate this. Like, okay, what's really the concern here? Like let me see if I can work with you. Like, okay, maybe I would represent it in a way that that's true to me, true to the situation, but I would also sort of be proactive and show how we're going to get things to green, right? So this is my summary. I don't know, did I miss out on anything? Do you want to add something there?
What I liked about the Jim Kouzes conversation is at least start there of trying to, how can we help her in this situation? How can we turn this into a situation that actually is for the better? Because that comment I made in passing before about truth and time walking hand in hand, it's just true. I mean, the news comes out, and the pretty famous Colin Powell quote that bad news isn't wine; it doesn't get better with age. It's like if it's yellow or red now, we might have a recovery plan, but hiding it usually doesn't make it better. So we're trying to be an ally. So at least we start there. And if it's truly ethical, that's where we dig our heels in, so we don't end up on the the front page of the New York Times, so to speak. It's like that but I've learned not jump there first.
Right.
Try to make it better.
Amazing. Awesome. So we're going to move on to the next question. But if you are, wherever you're watching this from, if you're watching it on YouTube, please do subscribe. If you are listening to this on LinkedIn, just, engage. If you're listening to this on Substack or Spotify or Apple, please do subscribe us and leave us a 5-star rating. If you're enjoying this, it costs you nothing. It's free, but it goes a long way in helping us. All right. So coming back to the show, the next question. So this is the career ceiling. So this person says, I've been a PM for 7 years. My performance reviews are strong. My projects are successful, yet people around me keep getting promoted while I stay in the same role. What am I missing? What are your thoughts, Andy?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. And once again, I suppose the answer to all these is it depends. But let's say it's true, objectively, other people are getting promoted. And it feels like, I'm not. So what's going on? Years ago, I interviewed a guy named Dan Rust, and he wrote probably the best book on office politics that I've ever read. It's called Workplace Poker. And the subtitle almost makes it sound like it's a smarmy sort of thing. It's like something like, are you playing the game or getting played? I'm pretty sure that's the subtitle. And there's nothing in it about backstabbing or, unethical techniques for office politics. If I had to summarize what I remember from the book, it is, we need to pay more attention. And he's like, if someone gets laid off, it shouldn't be a surprise. And I'm oversimplifying his point, but if someone's getting promoted and I'm not, it shouldn't be a surprise. Like I should be, if I'm paying enough attention, there are clues around the organization of what's going on. And so if I was in this person's situation, I might try to, first of all, avoid the BSL narrative, right? So avoid thinking of this because this boss is just being unethical, or somehow lazy with reviews or something like that. So you look at the people who are getting promoted, and what is it that they're doing or not doing?
Okay.
And let's do a little brainstorming between you and me. Can you think of somebody that you had the opportunity to promote, but you didn't? We're not going to give any personal information of who they are or what the situation was, but can you think of somebody that you didn't promote? Even though they might have been doing their job well, because this person, if I remember it from what you said, they're getting good performance reviews.
Right. Yeah. So I don't think, I'm trying to think. Usually when somebody is promotion worthy, I do that, except my hands are tied. Maybe the company is going through financial difficulty and there's like a freeze on everything. But normally when that's not the case, I do promote.
Yeah. So here's a thought. I started my career as a software developer, so I'm really a geek at heart. Okay? And I was promoted into management for all the wrong reasons. And you see this, like someone's good at a call center. Let's make them a manager of the call center, or they're a good salesperson. Let's make them a sales manager. And we've all seen it where they destroy their teams. It was like the halo effect. We assumed because they're good here, they're going to be good there. Right. And so there've been times I've not promoted somebody because, hey, listen, they're a good software developer, let's say, but I don't think they would be very good at leading people. So they're getting good performance reviews, but for some reason, if we go back to the scenario that you said, whoever that boss is or whoever the supervisor is to the management level, they don't see this person sitting in that next role. They just can't envision that they would be effective in that role. And if we acknowledge that it's not just politics, it's not just something against this person per se, but maybe objectively, they don't see me. How about this? Sometimes I didn't promote somebody because I didn't think they'd even be interested. Like they didn't interested. So I had a coaching client who he was director level, and we were meeting in the fall. So it was like a September sort of time frame. And what he told me was, he goes, by next March, I want to be a vice president. And if I'm not a vice president, I'm going to leave. And he goes, and he wanted help getting that role. And so I'm like, are you sure it's about the title? Is it about the title? Is it you want more influence? He goes, it's the title. I need the title. And so, everyone gets to figure out their own values and priorities and stuff like that. So we put together a plan, and the plan was not walking in of like, make me a VP by March or I walk. That's entitlement, right? So that's not what it was. The plan was, hey, my career progression is really important. I want to be a vice president by March, but I want to earn it. What do I need to do? What are the steps I need to take to get to that level? And you see the difference. It wasn't entitlement, but he just made his interest known. And by the way, he got the title. And please know, I'm not saying it's great coaching. I think he got it because he made the ask. And Christy R. Scott Smith, I think it is. I have to think what her last name is. But she wrote a book called Begin Boldly. And it's a book written for women. Like the subtitle talks specifically about women, but I got so much value out of the book. But here's something she says in the book. Life is not like a day at the fair. Good things do not come to those who wait. Good things come to those who ask. And so I had to really think about that, because I think, like, we all know that in the perfect world, our good work should stand for itself, right? It should, in the perfect world. That's not the world we live in. And different cultures will look at this in different ways as well, depending on where you live, and different company cultures. But what she's saying, Christy R. I have to remember her last name, but Begin Boldly is definitely the name of the book. What she's saying is sometimes you have to make the ask. So I think what I'd say to this person is, hey, make it clear what you want. And by the way, before you do that, make sure you know why you want it, because some people aspire for a paycheck, and man, oh man, you might aspire for a paycheck and be miserable at that next level, So like, make sure you know why you want it, what you want, but then make it known, but not in an entitled way. Like, this is what I would like. What do I need to get there? And I don't recommend necessarily the by March or I walk for sure, but it might be in a listen. I do have these goals. I want to earn it. Now, what would it take? And I think I certainly saw it with that coaching client. I've seen people sit back and wait for their good work to speak for itself, and it just doesn't. While other people made it known. So good things come. And by the way, to be fair, good things do come to those who wait. There is something about patience, but I think Christy's bigger point though is sometimes you need to make the ask to make sure it's clear. And I think there are a lot of people, like I grew up in the Midwest of the US, and I think sometimes in the South of the US, I think there are specific cultures, maybe some Asian cultures, maybe some parts of the world, it's not as easy to make the ask. It might sound almost pompous or feel arrogant. But if it's done respectfully, and if it's not done in a spirit of entitlement, it could give you the opportunity.
Right. No, that's really that's really amazing. So let me just make sure that I summarized and reflected what I heard you say, and feel free to correct me. So first of all, you want to make sure that you know why you want that promotion, right? Because sometimes we need to be honest with ourselves, like why is it that we really want that promotion? And then number two, you pay attention to the people around you that are getting promoted. Like, is there a pattern that you can see that's common with all those people getting promoted? And then,
for example, do they volunteer for opportunities? Do they speak up more in meetings? Do they, as superficial as it sounds, do they dress differently? Like, do they, like maybe my Hawaiian shirts every day are comfortable and authentically me, but it's not in this culture, maybe this organizational culture, it's not giving off the vibe they want. Like, but you don't have to change, but like you just said, you summarized it really well. What do we see any patterns there? Yeah.
Right. So do we see any patterns? And then, make the ask, right? So just have that open conversation that these are my goals and I would like to get there. And then, you can now come up with a plan, right? So this is what I heard you say. Is that
yeah, that's good. And it's Christy Hunter Arscott. I'm pretty sure that's her name.
Okay.
Pretty sure that's
all right. Before we move on to the next question, is it okay if I push back a bit, Andy?
Please. Yeah.
So what about if this person says, okay, you know what, I've looked around and I noticed that the people that are getting promoted are people of a certain, like they have a certain personality, or maybe they belong to a particular ethnicity, or, what have you, or a particular gender. I am doing work. I'm even doing work more than some of these people, but it's because I am, I'm a minority. I am, a woman. I am this. I speak with an accent, etc. That is why I am not getting promoted. What would you advise me? Yeah,
what comes to mind when you said that was it was a company I got to know one person at from a coaching perspective, and in this case, he just happened to have a Greek background. And he said his boss's name, and inside I'm thinking that sounds kind of Greek. And the more I heard, it's like a very there's a strong ethnicity to that company. And as best I could tell, the way to move along in that company is to be Greek. And some companies are like, it was a small company, it's a very small company, but in some companies there could definitely be a bias for or against certain things. And if it's one of those things of all of them are men and none of the women, it's not just me, it's all these other women aren't either, then I think in Dan Rust, he'd say, pay attention to that. And if that's the case, I think I would still start by saying, I have the desire for this. What do I need to get there? And just see what they say. And if they're like, it ain't going to happen. Or if they give you just vague generalities and as best you can tell, it's not going to happen, then it's just good to know now. This isn't the place for me, Like if it truly, but I think, so my lived experience is going to be different than a lot of other people. So I've not been a minority in a situation. So I've not struggled with that. So I'm not discounting that at all. I'm just saying it might be easy to jump to that as the answer or the cause when what if we try some of this other stuff? And but if it, let's say it's just it just really obvious that it's like, as a woman, you're just not gonna, they're just not gonna promote me. Or as this minority, it's just they just won't. And now's the time to be. I was taught it as exit power. Always know what you do if you lost your job. Always have a plan B. Don't wait until you're laid off. Always have exit power. And when you have exit power, it emboldens you in probably every situation we're going to talk about today. Because it's like at some point, if I know that, well, I've built out my network. I'm active on LinkedIn. I stay in touch with my former employers. I've been doing a side hustle on the side, learning some stuff. If you have exit power, then it's like, it's not worth it here, because as a Black woman, I'm never going to get promoted here. And as best I can tell, through all the things I've tried, it's not going to happen. So exit power.
Nice. So a couple of things that I really like that you mentioned. So number one is still having that conversation early on so that you can know right away, like where I stand, right? As opposed to, hoping and thinking, okay, maybe there was a chance, like, so you have that, and then you know where you stand right away. And then the second thing that I really like that you mentioned is exit power, like, because like that sort of you're taking control of the narrative, as opposed to being, okay, exactly, yeah. So I really like that. Yeah, no, amazing. Thanks for that. So let's move to the next question. So this is the layoff survivor. So this person says, my company just went through layoffs. Workload increased, morale is down, everyone is worried about who's next. How do I keep projects moving when the team is emotionally exhausted?
Yeah. And this is really timely too. I'm thinking of a couple of specific organizations that we do a lot of work with, and there are definitely people in these situations. Do you remember by chance the cartoon series called The Far Side? Do you ever remember seeing The Far Side? I don't know how long ago Gary Larson died, but funny cartoons, like really, really funny cartoons, really smart humor, and subtle at times too. But he has this one cartoon that my recollection is it's like you're looking through a gun sight. So all you see in the cartoon is a gun sight, and the crosshairs are on a bear who's standing next to another bear, and the bear who's in the crosshairs is pointing to the other bear. And so basically it's like, don't shoot me, shoot him. Yeah. That's kind of what the cartoon is. And I think in these sort of situations, because I've been in them and I've seen a lot of people in the situation, it's almost like your focus is don't get fired, don't get fired, don't get fired. Get somebody else fired. And the focus is so much on, I don't want to be the next one. Yeah, I just got to be better than them. We get so distracted that we forget. And this is the biggest thing I find when I was in this situation, and when I run into anybody, whether coaching client or just a friend, focus on value personally. And I think that's what you did in your story, in your situation. You just focus on value. Like, how can I add value today? Because I'm not saying you are immune to layoff if you're focused on value. Right. Because decisions are going to get made. But it is a lot harder. I've been on the decision-making side of who to let go before. And sometimes it's just purely based on seniority. But a lot of times the hiring manager has some say, and it's I'm not trying to oversimplify it, but it's much more difficult to hire the person who's delivering value. And so focus on the value. Hey, I understand there's a lot of stuff going on. We're not going to ignore what's going on. But let's be the people that keep our eyes on the prize, right? Let's go on a mission. Let's do everything we can. And this one company I can think of, they had outsourced almost their entire IT organization. They went from hundreds of people down to a couple dozen, maybe 3 dozen, something like that. It was a war zone. I mean, I think the reason they brought me out to do some project management training was they're like, let's throw these people a bone. Like they were just like you described it. I mean, I can't remember all the words you talked about, but like morale is down and people are burned out and workloads increase. Well, if workloads increase, maybe we give them some skills. Anyway, it was just almost like the survivor's guilt, like all my other friends. But this is what I found is Like one person, this is a direct quote from the meeting. I hope this reorganization fails. I hope this company goes under. And and it's going to sound like I'm judging, but I'm not. If anybody's gone through this, I think that's a very natural feeling. Like, I disagree. Here's the thing: that ship had sailed. Those people were gone. They've already got other jobs, most of them. And now the decision this person has is, do I want to stay or not? Like, is this the kind of company I want? If they're laying off more and more people, I don't want to be the last one left on the ship before it goes down. And so maybe I need to focus on the exit power myself. Right. That might be part of it. But while I think exit power, how can I just focus on value? Value. How can I deliver the most value now? How can I arm our team? How can I almost like be a shield to the team? This is one of the biggest things I've learned from Marcus Buckingham, his book, 9 Lies About Work. He said, let's say it's a great culture at the top level of the organization, but a pretty toxic culture on the team level, people are going to leave. It doesn't matter. You can work for a great company, but if it's bad on this team, people are going to leave. If it's not so good at the top level, but it's good at the team level, people stay longer. Yeah. And so what I love about that is, to me, that's empowering to say, hey, listen, there's like all kinds of stuff going on around here. What can we do as a team? Like, how can I be a shield to my team? How can I make the culture in our team, as sucky as this situation is, as good as possible? And that is not ignoring what's going on, but how can we make it as good as possible for what we're doing? And let's go on mission. Well, for sure, me thinking about my exit power and maybe even sharing that idea with other people, like, hey, listen, I don't want you to go, but also I don't want you to feel like you're a victim either. And so that can be kind of an uncomfortable conversation. But this idea of shielding the team from the rest of the carnage that's going on organizationally, I think that'd be definitely something I'd consider.
Yeah, no, a couple of things that stood out for me there. So you know how people normally, like some people, before they join a company, they normally go on Glassdoor to go look at it. Yeah. And I think, you should do your research before you go into a company. But I've seen people that have gone to like some of the best places to work, like well-known brand name tech, and they've had like their worst career experiences in those companies. Sure. And then also the reverse is also the case, where it's like, okay, this company is known for, it's a big company, they don't have great reviews, but then you find yourself in a pocket where it's like you really love your team, your boss. So your boss and your team is that shield. So it's like you're in this oasis, right? So that came up for me when you mentioned, okay, if you're in a position of influence, because everybody has their sphere of influence, right? So you want to make sure, you want to try to be that shield where it's like, okay, I'm going to deliver value, and I'm also going to like be a good team member, and maybe even protect my team from other distractions. And when you do that, like that just makes the working experience and your project experience better for you and for them, right? So I really, that came up for me when you mentioned that. That's good. Yeah, and then I guess just to summarize what you're saying, so you want to focus on value, right? Because and also one thing I like about that is, I think you have 2 choices. Are you gonna focus on value or not, right? And if you don't focus on value, it's not the best circumstance to be in. But if you don't focus on value, you actually increase your chance of being let go, right? So you might as well.
I really think so. Yeah.
So you might as well try to focus on value. And then on top of that, I think also maybe even from a personal standpoint, I think many people will feel guilty if they, if you don't try your best, right? So even from a selfish standpoint, like I don't want to feel like, I want to feel like I gave it my best. So even though like this is not the greatest company to be in, but I did my part while I was here, right? And then the other thing is, just acknowledge the emotion. So don't pretend like people are not affected by what's going on. Yes, acknowledge it, but then we work towards contributing and also work to shield the team. Yeah. So I
feel like a theme through our conversation has been, what can we do to not feel as much of a victim as we might normally feel in these sort of situations. What can we
Right.
do to try to, even if you can increase agency a little bit, like just a little bit of more agency. I just think I think better when I'm thinking that way. So I think that's been a theme.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, I remember there was one time that I was in this position, and this was a very, very like I had like about 3 or 4 bosses in the span of 2 years, like in a very short period. So it was like the company was just going through a lot, like their stocks were like down in the dumps. So it was just, and then of course, when all of that is happening, the environment just becomes more unsavory, and you see all these characters, people playing politics and all of that. Yeah, and I just felt I was just having this anxiety, like, it's only going to be a matter of time, because you see emails, people are covering themselves, pointing fingers, and all of that. And I remember just feeling very anxious. And on top of that, like the job is still there, and the demands are higher because they're letting go people, and then you are taking on more departments and all of that. But I just remember just feeling just anxious every time after work, and you're working extra time because you want to keep your job.
Right.
And then my wife and I were just like, okay, you know what you are afraid of? If it does happen, what are we going to do about it? Like, let's make a plan. Right. And when we did that, like, it's just so amazing how much agency you take back.
Yes.
Right. And it's like, now you're empowered. Like, okay, if this happens, this is the plan. And then it actually happened where we're laid off, but the effect was not as jarring. Right.
Yes.
It felt like, okay, yes, I had a plan, and we move forward with it. So I really like that, just to your point of, like taking agency back. So so there's always something that we can do, no matter the situation, to I think to take some agency back.
I know a guy, I think it's been 35 years or so he's been at a company, just got laid off, high level, and I don't think it was expected. And so he wasn't updating his resume, wasn't updating LinkedIn, wasn't active, wasn't building stuff. This idea of having exit power, of like, what would I do? And that doesn't make you less of a committed employee. In fact, in some ways, I think it makes me a better employee. Like, hey, I'm gonna do everything that I can to make this a great thing. But I also know there's other options. So I don't know. I don't oversimplify it, but I think that's part of that agency.
Yeah, amazing. And I think this leads us to another question, which is going to be related to this. All right. So this is leading a team towards a finish line that will hurt them. All right. So I am leading a transformation project. Leadership has privately informed me that once this project is complete, some roles will be eliminated. The team doesn't know. Many of the people helping to make the project successful may ultimately lose their jobs because of it. I've been instructed not to discuss the restructuring. How do I lead with integrity in a situation like this?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, because I've been in situations where you literally could not say something because of compliance reasons, like there's going to be a buyout, or there's due diligence going on something, and so I mean, it's actually a legality thing that you can't talk about it. So I don't know if that would be at that level here, but my take on it, without knowing more of the situation, is if you're specifically told you cannot tell them, then I think you probably have to follow that. But if I really care about these people, then is there a way that I can kind of help them? And so I wonder if there's a way of coaching them of, hey, listen, while we're working on this, I've been learning a lot about LinkedIn lately. I might say, like, I find that just because there's been a lot of stuff going on, it's not it's not insubordinate to update your LinkedIn. It's not insubordinate to update my resume. And I almost like I'm doing that. Have you ever thought about doing that? You know what I'm saying? Like, you're not telling them, but you're almost in a coaching sort of way of trying to help them. And and you're not even like, I can't tell you, wink, wink, what's going on. It's not that. It's just, I feel like it's, well, I don't know. I'm interested in people's thoughts on this. maybe that is a good thing for people to coach their people to do all the time. Because if I'm that generous with people of like, hey, I not only want you on my team, I'm so glad you're on my team. I want what's best for you. I mean, that's part of the core of servant leadership is I want the best for you. I want your well-being. And so I think I might be inclined to coach him in that sort of way. I don't know. I'm curious what you think about that.
Yeah, no, I think that's an interesting way to go about it, because on the one hand, you know that you're safe.
Yeah.
Right. So you're sort of putting yourself out there and saying, actually, I am updating my resume. So that will, I think like that would earn trust. And because normally people don't disclose things like that. Right. So I think maybe that's a way of sort of letting them know without being out of compliance, right? Because you have, I mean, if you've been told not to tell people, like I think it will be,
even if it's not a legality thing,
right? I think it might even be. I don't want to speak out of turn, but I don't think it will be right to do that, because you signed up to work for the company and you are. You're supposed to carry out your duties, but I don't think it would be right to let people know. Yeah, I don't know. I'm thinking out loud there. But what I would say is that, like, I think I've seen both sides of this, because I've had a situation where my boss let me know that, hey, something is coming. And he wasn't supposed to let me know, but I think because of that relationship, was like, just be prepared. But thinking about it now, I don't know if was that helpful? I don't know.
It is interesting, because I can think of a company in the Chicago area where it was, I want to say it was over the summer. They said in late November, which in the US is Thanksgiving. So what they said is by Thanksgiving, but by late November, we're going to have some big layoffs. But they said it in the summer, and they had all that time where people are just in a tizzy. And so you don't, I mean, ultimately, I don't think in the situation you gave, I don't think it's an ethical issue necessarily. You're not told to lie. You're just told you can't tell.
Can't say, yeah.
So it might be one of those things where, I can't tell them that they're going to be like, oh, and I think you might have said there may be layoffs. They're not for sure they're going to be layoffs. And so that might be something to keep in mind as well.
Right,
but I think, isn't it good just to always coach people? Hey, what are your career goals? Like, I want to make sure, whether it's here or elsewhere, I care for that much.
Right. No, and I think like that's more like I feel like that will be taken better if you're in a leadership position, right, in the team. But like right now, I'm trying to think of a PM who is maybe leading peers or people even above the PM, right? So like the dynamic is a bit different there, but yeah, I like the idea of when you have a certain level of influence over somebody, like coaching them to looking out for their career, right? Is that mentorship kind of relationship, I guess, where it's like I want you to be successful here and even outside of here, because you're not going to be here forever.
I think I would I don't remember exactly how someone said this, but it was along the lines of if it was let's say someone has a son or a daughter and they were in that situation, what would you want their boss to do if they were the boss of your son or daughter? And it's not perfectly clarifying in every situation, because I think in that case I'd want them to tell my son or daughter, but if your son or daughter was in the leadership role, what would you want them to do? And I think I'd want them to be keep integrity,
right.
If I've been told I can't tell, I think in that case, I'd be inclined to follow it. Yeah.
Right. No, for sure. Somebody, Jason mentioned something in the chat. Let me just spot that. Sometimes companies may hesitate to promote someone if they view them as being more technically focused rather than someone suited for management or a leadership role. However, this varies from company to company.
That's a good thought. Yeah, I think he's right.
Thanks for sharing.
And I can think of some technical people who I just assumed they wouldn't be interested in the management role. And in fact, one guy did promote, and about 3 months later, he said, "Can't get me out of this role." I'm like, "Why?" He goes, "I can't sleep and I'm drinking too much." He goes, and so we took him out of the role. But interestingly, about 5 years later at a different company, he was in a leadership role. So, and you could say I promoted him too early, maybe. You know? So, but yeah, I think Jason's point's right on.
Yeah, no, timing is important as well. All right, so I think we can now go to rapid fire recommendations. Are you good with that, Andy?
Oh yeah, that's good. Yeah.
What's one book you love or recommend?
You know, if you ask me, my favorite restaurant is usually the last one I went to. So our most recent episode is with Marcus Buckingham, who many people call him the father of the strengths movement, but basically it's a book. It's so good. And I think most people wouldn't pick it up. It's called Design Love In. And it's about how can we, even in some of the scenarios we talked about, how can you lovingly lead people during a layoff? In fact, I actually asked him, how would you have that conversation? What does love mean? What does it not mean? We're uncomfortable sometimes using the word loving in work, and it's a good one. It's a really good one.
Okay. Design Love In.
Design Love In, Marcus Buckingham. It's his latest book. Just came out.
Yeah. I'll check it out. Yeah, because I know him from the Strengths Finder, and I really love
Yeah, first break all the rules. He's a researcher at heart, and all these people during his research were saying, "I love my job, I love my company," but he thought it was just hyperbole because I love my socks, I love my mom, I love my job. But he goes, you know who stays? The people who say I love my job. If they said, excuse me, the people, if it's out of 1 to 5, 5 is I love my job. 4 is I like my job. 4 is leave. 5 stay. So what can we do to get people to want to love their role, to love this team, to and not just the feelings or emotions of it, but how do you design love in? And by the way, agency is one of the things that we talked about. Yeah.
Interesting. All right. What's one app you love or recommend?
This is a new app for me. It's called Anki, A-N-K-I. And I just bring it up because it's not one that would be a typical one that people would use. But I interviewed a guy named Steve Kale, who wrote a book called Leadership Recall. Like, how do you remember something? Like, even from today's discussion, someone might say, I want to remember BSL narrative. But then like 6 days later, they're like, what was the B? You know? So how do you remember stuff? And his book is all about how do you remember stuff? And Anki is, I've never used Quizlet, but it's kind of like you put stuff in there. So things I'm trying to remember or memorize, I just put it in there. And then it does a special algorithm so each morning I just spend a short amount of time going through, and I can review some things. And it's that review process, how it does intelligent. It's open source, no cost to it. So it's just a different one. Yeah.
Interesting. Thanks for the recommendation. What's one podcast you love or recommend?
I am a big fan of The Knowledge Project.
Okay.
I think it's there's huge diversity of guests, pretty long form, but I would say the guest is probably the best question asker, most curious person that I know. I mean, from the podcast world. Yeah, Knowledge Project.
Amazing. What's one productivity hack that actually works for you?
I have an agent that runs each morning that reads my emails, looks at my calendar, looks at my personal Asana board. I use a personal Kanban instead of a to-do list. And it's designed to give me the heads up on certain things, like what's on my plate today, emails I might have missed. Less things are falling through the cracks, and I'm letting it read my email. I'm letting it look at. So you always have to figure out where are you comfortable letting. But this is an agent that it gave me the ability to practice creating an agent, but I'm getting daily value out of it.
Okay. And if you don't mind sharing, like, where did you build the agent? And
Claude Cowork.
Claude Cowork. Okay.
Yeah. And I really started with, because I don't know Python. I don't know that stuff. Even though I'm a software developer, the geek in me is like, I think we can figure this out. I just started with Cowork and said, this is what I want. Let's build it together. And it'll build. I mean, it's iterative, but I think so much of our AI is trying to figure out what prompt to give it. Right. Increasingly, it is what do you want and let it figure it out. So anyway, that's
Yeah, that's amazing, and that's actually, I'm actually trying to do something right now similar to that. Like, look at my calendar, Slack, email, and just give me almost like a chief of staff, or like
yeah.
an
A lot of tools. A lot of tools. I personally, my ChatGPT is down probably 75 to 80%. I'm still paying for it, but Claude is definitely higher, and Cowork mostly.
Yeah, interesting, amazing. All right, last question. When you're stressed, overwhelmed, what helps you out?
I mean, I'm deeply, I guess, outsider might think I'm a religious guy, but ultimately my faith is just huge. And so it's fundamental to who I am. This will sound kind of crazy, Mukhtar, but it's not every day, but almost every week, I try to envision what it's going to be like taking my last breath on earth and the first breath of eternity. And it is amazing how clarifying that is. I don't stress out about politics or current events nearly as much when I do that. I just work situations. It's just, we so focus on the now and not the long term. And so that's a very practical thing. And for somebody who, well, that's not their thing. I interviewed Dr. John LaPuma. He wrote a book called The Indoor Epidemic. And this also helps me. It's get outside. Like he's like, get outside. And so we try to go watch a sunset once a week at a lake nearby us. I'm walking more, and there's just something very therapeutic.
Right.
And I feel like I can intersect my faith with that as well. And it's, I'm telling you, it doesn't mean I don't get stressed out, but it's perspective.
Right.
With me, a lot of stress and burnout is when I lose perspective.
Right. Well, that's beautiful. Thanks for sharing that. So we've come to the end of the show. Andy, this was really amazing. Thank you so much for coming and sharing your insights. For people that want to get a hold of you or want to connect with you, how can they do that?
Probably the easiest way to get something for free from me is just listen to the podcast, the People in Projects podcast. If somebody wants to connect, I've maxed out the connections on LinkedIn, but almost always someone leaves LinkedIn, so there might be a way to connect there. But if you, if somebody has a follow-up question, let's say they have a follow-up question, show at peopleinprojectspodcast.com. So it's just show at peopleinprojectspodcast.com. If they send an email to that, I would, I answer every email I get. So I'd be glad to, if somebody disagrees with something that I said, I am unoffendable. So much of this is really shades of gray, right? And so I would love to follow up with anybody on anything they heard.
All right. Amazing. Thank you so much. And for those of you, watching, thank you for tuning in, and see you soon. Bye.